Hello everybody, welcome back to another layout update. It's been a while since I've last recorded one of these. Reason being is it's summer, weather's been fairly decent, so it's nice to get outside and get some yard work done. Plus working, that's gotten away quite a few times, and really up until recently I haven't actually done much work to the layout. Maybe last month, July, I was up here cutting a little bit of foam, as you may already be able to tell. But other than that, it's been pretty slow progress in the last 2 months, and it's actually starting to pick up again now that I have a fair amount of supplies that I need to start using. So let's get to it, and I'll show you what I've completed and what's on the go, so stay tuned. So the branch line here is where I first started to cut the foam, and I first showed you guys that I was securing the foam and cutting it to fit in place. I've done much more, as you could probably tell in the opening shot, and as you can see here, there's some track that's very temporary. It's not hooked up or anything. I'll go over that later in the video, but just give me a minute. I'll swing the camera around and I'll show you some of the areas that I've cut foam and secured them down just recently. So that piece of track where it ends there is where we left off cutting the foam, and as you can see, that's just recently glued last night, all that foam there. And I picked up from where I left off basically, and just recently, as of last night basically, I started putting in the backdrop, which is kind of like the fascia board material, a masonite 1/8 of an inch thick hardboard. And I probably should have installed this before I started the foam. Reason being is now I'm having to come back and recut the foam and fit it in place for all the curved corners in the backdrop. And it's making all my cuts that I did previously a lot more tight, and I'm having to cut down some of the pieces even more than what I already did. It's not a bad thing. It's not that much, well, it is a little bit more work, but it isn't setting me back very far at all. It's just probably one of those things that you should have thought of before. I'll reposition the camera, I'll show you some more of the backdrop that I've completed and more of the foam that I have installed. So give you a second here. So now on the other side of the swing gates, as you can see, I installed fascia board between the windows. I'm not covering up the windows, of course, because that is one of the ways that I can cool this room off in the summer when it gets really hot. What I will probably eventually do is I will make a backdrop that I can slide in behind the bench work, and it would be one whole piece for the upper and lower. It would have both backdrops depending on which is which. You just slide in there, and that way I can video that scene without having a huge window in the background. The backdrop has been fairly challenging, so to speak. I've had to do a few extra things to the bench work in order to accommodate for warping and such. I'll show you when we get a little further ahead in this video, but for now, all this foam here is secured in place. I just took the weights off because they're a bunch of ugly bins rather than these metal weights. But again, I had to cut the foam and reposition it in order to accommodate for that curved backdrop there. All this foam and backdrop that you're looking at now is secured in place. And as you can see, this is where I kind of left off with the backdrop and securing the foam in place. And I'll get to how I'm installing the backdrop in just a minute here. So another thing that I probably should have looked out for, and as a tip to you guys to look out for, is you know that I have these uprights on the wall here that go straight up and down all the way across the wall length and width wise, and same as the peninsula down the center of the room. That is how I support my upper lower level, and that's how I was going to attach my backdrop. But being that I'm using 1/8 of an inch backdrop, it is quite flimsy, and in between each of those posts the board warps inwards, and I don't want, obviously you do not want any warpage, because that can make or break a layout really. In the end, it's getting a nice shot of a train running down a straightaway, but then seeing that your backdrop is all over the place. How I'm accommodating for that though, and this is a fair amount of work, but if I need to do it in order to get it right, I'm going to do it, is I'm putting cross supports in, I guess you could say. I'm screwing them, I'm doing 2 for each gap. So I've already cut about 40 of these and I'm a quarter of the way around the room, maybe only an eighth. So I have a lot of work to do, but at the end, this is working really well. I'm liking the results. The backdrop is very nice and straight. I'm doing one close to the top, as high, as close to the upper level bench work as I can. I have to stop there because of that metal L bracket. I can't drill through that, and I don't want to, it's just going to be extra work to drill through that anyways. Right there works just fine, and then as you can see, I'm getting as close to the bottom as I can. That one's not secured in place because I have to cut it down just a little bit, but like, yeah, I'm securing them as close to the benchwork as I can, and I thought that maybe there would be still even a little bit of warpage where there is no cross support. That is not the case. It's very solid. Like trying to move the backdrop with my hands where I can fit them is, it moves very, very little. And I cut the backdrop, I actually got it cut at Lowe's. And I got it cut there. I left a little bit of room at the top underneath the upper level for a little bit of expansion, contraction. Hopefully that's enough. I'm not too sure if it is, but being that our summers are seeming to cool off a little bit, I don't think I'll have too much problem up here, and if need be, I'll install an AC unit, because last summer it got real hot up here. So I'll continue on with showing you what I've completed with the foam here in just a second. Continuing on from the backdrop there, I was explaining, I've cut the foam. This is not glued down yet because I still have to do the backdrop. Cut the foam for this mini peninsula here, and it continues all the way down to that far corner there. And as you can see, I have all that backdrop laid out for the bottom level to see how far I could get. And I'll reposition the camera and show you what else I've done for cutting the foam and whatnot. Now down here at the end of the room, I have installed the foam, not glued down, but it's cut to fit in place, which will have to be repositioned anyways when I get the backdrop in. I've cut the foam all the way down and around here on the peninsula, and pretty much the entire lower level is completely covered with foam, with the exception of like a 2.5 foot section right at the end there, and my swing gates. I just didn't have anything that was really wide enough to fit that gap. But I will probably continue doing the foam on the swing gates, hopefully tonight when I get home from work. And I actually have one more thing to show you here for the bench work. So just give me a minute and I'll reposition the camera yet again. So I'm set up here at the end of the peninsula by the swing gates because it's probably the easiest place to show you. But as you can see, I have installed a bunch of these triangle brackets underneath the upper level. I've installed them about every second or third post, depending on where the supports are that tie into the floor, or like the small peninsula, I have a wall in the middle to break up the seams. I didn't add any around that area because it's pretty solid as is. But I installed these to basically sturdy it up a little bit more. They go all the way around the room on the upper level. Like I said, every second to third post, sturdied it up quite a bit. It's quite rigid now. Still a little bit of movement in the center peninsula of side to side because the wall only ties into the ground, and probably would have been nice to tie it into the roof to stop the side to side motion when you bump into it, but I don't think it's really going to be that big of a deal. I can still do a few things to make it a little more rigid. like I said, I don't think it's that big of a deal anyways. But these brackets here stop the movement from sagging, because once I start adding weight on there, it will probably sag a little bit. This hopefully will stop that. And a few of the areas, it was already sagging just from the bench work, or the wood itself. The weight of the wood made it sag just a little bit. So after adding these, it's pretty nice and solid. And that's pretty much it for the bench work and foam. So I'll show you what I plan for the track on the branch line. I actually have one more thing after that I'll explain, and we'll wrap this video up. So basically, I'm not going to really display any track layout there, but there's going to be a large 32 radius curve in that area, tie into the track there, which is not secured in any way. But right after that, there'll be a switch. And that's going to be the siding for the grain silo. It's not going to be a prototypical grain operation. It's just going to be there to support the idea that that's where grain cars get loaded. It's going to be so unprototypical that the way I'm going to simulate a grain train being loaded is similar to coal. It just drives through, sort of thing. But that grain silo will actually, depending on the operating session, will either be a grain silo or it'll be a potash loading facility, depending on which trains are running and whatnot, because I have a potash that I have nowhere to load that I could fit on the layout, or a place that I could make it fit and look good. I have nowhere to really put that. So like I said, depending on the operating session, it could be a grain silo or it could be a potash facility. And again, not going to be prototypical loading, but it just needs to be there to support the idea of that's where they get loaded. I'll reposition the camera further down here and I'll show you the industrial park. So that's the end of the grain siding there in the top left of your screen. Past there is this little S curve that will go into this straight stretch of track, which will be a small little shallow bridge. And then the track curves back towards the edge of the layout. There'll be a switch there, which is the switch for the main siding in this industrial park. I'll just reposition the camera to give you a better overall view of this area. So give me a second. So like I said, that switch in the bottom of the screen there, that is the switch for the main siding. Not a huge siding, and neither of the sidings really are that large, because during an operating session, there will be two separate trains that will come into this area at two separate times. Because it's just, there's no siding that is large enough to handle a train the length of what is needed to service all the industries. So one train will service two of the industries, the other train will service two other industries, vice versa, and they'll only be really like 5 cars long. So this, I'll explain the industries. This industry here is a LPG distributor. Over here is a steel fabricating facility. To the far track up there, that is going to be a plastics facility. And then the last little track there, that'll just be a furniture warehouse or pallet warehouse or something like that. That'll just take box cars. Nothing else other than that. And like I said, each train that comes here services 2 industries. And I have the main line running down the middle here. Then there's that siding I was talking about earlier. And this track here really isn't used as a siding. It's going to be used as more of a runaround track, because of this area is so tight and there's not a whole lot of space to move around and run around cars. Occasionally you'll need to spot cars onto the main line in order to get the cars out of the industry you're needing to get them out of. I think this area will be a pretty fun area to operate. This is actually the first stretch of track that I'm going to be securing down. So probably after this video is done, I'll start to trace out the track layout as to how I want it, because this is pretty much a finalized track plan. And then pretty much I got some cork here from my buddy Fred, BCR Railroading, and got him at a good price too, so I thank him for that. And it's pretty much enough. It's some of this Midwest cork, and then there's also actually some other cork here which is similar to the Midwest cork Roadbed. Don't know who it's made by though. I also have some more way in the back here, but it's pretty much enough cork to lay this whole area of track. So that'll be nice. I'll be able to start laying track, and really I can start running trains basically once it's all wired up, and that'll give me something to do and keep me interested, because it's going to be approaching a year pretty much that I tore down my last layout. So last thing before I wrap up this layout update, what you're looking at here is the fascia board that I'm going to be using. It's the same material and same thickness as what I'm using for the backdrop. And I actually lucked out because I have my backdrop cut to 19.5 inches, which is basically the spacing between upper and lower level is like 19 inches and 5/8 or something like that. But I got it cut to 9.5, so I can allow a little bit of room for expansion and contraction. But as luck would have it, these scrap pieces that I got that was left over after cutting a 4x8 sheet of this stuff down is 9 inches, which is perfect for fascia board along the front of my layout. So next time I go and get some backdrop cut down into 19.5 inches, I'm going to be starting to collect all of this stuff. I got, I think, 8 pieces of 8-foot by 9-inch pieces of fascia board. So that'll get me pretty much down the branch line and around past the swing gate. So it's a fair amount of fascia board. And yeah, I'm just kind of happy that I lucked out with that, because now I don't have to get another board really cut down. Eventually, I'll probably have to get 2 more 4x8 sheets of this cut down into these size strips to finish the fascia. And probably it'll be smaller because the upper level fascia board is going to be probably half of what this is. So yeah, we'll go ahead and wrap up this layout update now. So again, I apologize for the large 3-month gap between layout updates. And just unfortunately, I didn't do enough of one thing that would make it worthy of making a layout update, or did something spectacular that's worthy of sharing and making a whole video about. But like I said, summer, busy, been working. As you can tell, I've been doing a lot of rail fanning. That's just been kind of my after work or days off, that sort of thing. So I've been working pretty non-stop, which also hasn't given me a lot of time to get up here. But I'm back at it again. I'm going to be making a lot more progress. I should actually have a layout update come September if I work at it enough. So be on the lookout for that. Until then, I'm going to sign off. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. I will appreciate it. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next layout update.